The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.
Hello, friends. I'm David Pasqualone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, the Jacqueline Wales story. In this episode, Jacqueline is super transparent with us and really opens up. And I don't know about you, but some of the places she goes, I can really connect with. So in this episode, like all our episodes, they go deep and wide, and we have a central theme and topic and title of the episode, but there's so much more. So listen to the whole episode. She's going to talk about domestic violence, leaving her house as a teenager, alcoholism, drug use, divorce, self-sabotage. But she's also going to talk about overcoming fear, and not just overcoming fear, but how to forgive yourself and how to move on with life and how to make a successful marriage after so much drama and tragedy and hardship and baggage of the past. So this is a great episode to how to unpack your baggage, how to properly build a relationship, how not to build a relationship, and all sorts of great life advice. So check out this episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, the Jacqueline Wales story. And before you do, I just want to take a moment and thank our sponsors. Today, our episodes are sponsored by Creation Today. Creation Today is an organization that takes materials from all over the world and brings it to a central hub where you can find answers to the questions you have that's biblically based. Not about religion, but about the relationship with God. It's a wonderful organization. And then what I think is the best part of their ministry is their actual content that they've created. They have classes, they have courses, they have seminars, they have series, they have all these words you hear, but they have it at Creation Today. So what you can do is you can go to creationtoday.org. I'll put a link in the show notes, but then you can listen and you can ask questions and you can interact at your speed, at your pace, and on your journey, find truth. So Creation Today is one of our two sponsors. The next sponsor, drum roll, it's Butler's Auto Recycling in Pensacola, Florida. Our friend Jim Butler and his crew at Butler's Auto Recycling are amazing. My family and I buy parts off him all the time. I got 5 vehicles in our family. I got 2 teenagers, and unfortunately, we're always having little accidents. Fortunately, we have friends like Jim. Butler's Auto Recycling is not just in Pensacola, Florida, and Milton physically, but you can go online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have their website, their online store, and they even have an eBay store. So all the parts you need, you can find at Butler's Auto Recycling, and then you can take it to the next level by giving them a call. And if you can't find a part, an engine, a transmission, some kind of old classic muscle car part, if you can't find it online, give them a call because I'm sure they can help you find it. So Butler's Auto Recycling, we thank you. Thank you, Jim. To our other sponsor, Creation Today, Eric Hovind, we love you. And to our listeners now, enjoy this episode of the podcast with our friend, Jacqueline Wales. Hey, Jacqueline, how are you today?
I'm great, Dave. Thanks very much. And thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
Oh, I can't wait. The topic that you're tackling and telling your story is something that most of us in the world need. So I can't wait to share it with our audience. So as our listeners know, you're going to go through your story. You can go back from the time you were born, go through your upbringing, what made Jacqueline, and you can talk to us about whatever you think you had to face and overcome or accomplished, but then share the practical steps of how you did it so we can too. Then we'll transition into where you are today and how we as the community can help you get there. So with that said, let's get started. I can't wait to hear your story. So where does it all begin for Jacqueline?
So Jacqueline was born in Scotland, in Edinburgh, Scotland, to be precise, and more than about six decades plus years ago. So I've been around a while. And I grew up in a family that was really, really dysfunctional. We had the domestic violence, we had the alcoholism, we had all kinds of emotional abuses. You name it, it was part of the background. So I left home at the age of 16, and that was a big deal. And I moved from Edinburgh to London. So moving home at 16 with very little understanding of what the world was all about leaves you open to a lot of issues, to say the least. And people often ask me why I do the work that I do right now, which is all about helping people transform their life and move beyond the fears that are holding them back from who they want to be. And for me, it started in my childhood when I would learn how to run and hide, and I wasn't allowed to speak up, and I wasn't allowed to be me. So leaving home at 16 was a big deal. But of course, as soon as I left home, I got busted for drugs. So that was the first part of it. The life story in itself has been a lot of trial and error, a lot of challenges. I had my first child at the age of 20, and I gave her up for adoption. I got married and I had another child, and I left him with his father when he was 3.5. And then I moved to San Francisco. So the first 29 years of my life were really problematic, to say the least. Having left school at 15, I went back to college when I was 21 and eventually got a degree. But that was a big leap because nobody in my family had ever been educated beyond what you would call high school here. And for me, leaving school early, as I did, was mostly because I was bored. I really didn't think I had any smarts whatsoever. So it took a lot of experiences to finally convince me that there was something other than wasting your life and blowing it up every so often, which I was real good at doing. So here I am in San Francisco. I've arrived here and I know nobody. I don't have a job. I'm not even allowed to work here. I don't have a legal permit to work here. But, knowing that I've done everything by the seat of my pants up until this point, I'll figure it out. So I end up staying in San Francisco, meeting my husband that I've now been with for 41 years. And by the time number 3 arrived, my child number 3, there was a decision to really figure it out. And I said to the therapist at the time, she will leave me before I leave her. So that was really the beginning of what became a very, very deep understanding, a deep journey to reinvent myself. And maybe not even reinvent myself, but to find myself. And that sounds a little bit dramatic, but given where I've just come from, this was a big deal. There was a lot of things that I had to overcome, mostly about self-esteem, not believing that I was capable. The list was long. And I meet this every day in my coaching practice when I'm speaking with my clients. No matter how talented you are and how successful you are, there's still that little piece of you that goes, yeah, right. One of these days you're going to get found out. So it's the imposter syndrome at work. But my 40s were really a big deal for me because I started writing, I started singing, I started martial arts, and I started to build proper relationships with all of my kids, because by the time I reached the age of 40, I was on child number 5. And so there was a lot of baggage to unpack, shall we say. But I was definitely, convinced that I needed to go through this. Now, I've been very blessed in so many ways. Let's not say that this has been one hell of a ride. It has been a hell of a ride, frankly. But the point being is all of these challenges, all of these transformations, all of these opportunities for change have been quite significant. Edinburgh to London, London to San Francisco to Los Angeles, Los Angeles to Paris, Paris to Amsterdam, Amsterdam and Paris to Bali, and then to New York City, and then finally back around to the San Francisco Bay Area again. So there's been a lot of travel, there's been a lot of different experiences, and a lot of having to show up for your fears, and a lot of having to force myself to confront them and prove that I can get beyond them. And I would like to say at this point in time, I've written 3 books. I've made music throughout my 40s. I was a cantor for synagogues in Paris and Amsterdam for 5 years. And I started my own business at the age of 54 with nothing but a good idea. And we are a few years on from that, and I have what I have now. So I would say that's the journey. You wanted the story. It's a long one. Here it is.
Oh, no, that's great. We love stories on the Remarkable People podcast. So let me ask you a couple of questions. Our community, we're here to help each other grow, and we're thankful you're here to share your story. But in the practical details, like, you had to make some tough decisions in your life, and I'm sure they weren't easy and they weren't without regrets or even anger. First question I have for you is, for our listeners in similar situations, how did you learn to forgive yourself?
That's a big one right there. I think it's hard for people to forgive themselves. It's much easier to forgive others than it is to forgive yourself. And part of that is the messages that you've got wrapped up in your head. My father told me for years I would never amount to much. That was a big piece for me. And of course I believed it, and my behavior backed it up. We look for that confirmation bias. And I certainly went about proving that I really was a worthless piece of what. So having to redesign my thinking, reimagine who I can be is really the big piece of how I could build the confidence to move forward. So for anyone who's thinking right now, I really don't know how I'm going to overcome the challenges of my childhood. Here's the thing about it. It's gone. It's the past. It's over. And you have a choice at this moment in time to take a different direction, to think differently, to behave differently, to give yourself an option that, you might actually be smarter than you think you are, which was my case at a certain point in my life. You might actually be able to love unconditionally, which is a really big deal. You might be able to have intimate relationships with people. There are many ways in which this can show up, but first and foremost, you've got to start thinking about how you're thinking, because everything that we do is run by, first of all, our emotions and our thinking, and then our behavior, and the behavior leads to the actions. So when you think about that particular stream of emotions, thinking, behavior, and actions, and know that you have a choice in what you wish to engage with. And when people say to me, I don't have a choice, it is what it is. And I go, you just made a choice. That choice is to do nothing. That choice is to believe that you really can't move beyond where you are right now. But we all have the power to do that. We all have the capability of changing our lives. But you got to do the hard work, and it is hard work. You've got to constantly readjust. It's like a really high-powered engine where you're constantly fine-tuning it, and you're never done. And I have to say, the only time you're going to be done is when you're going out the door in a pine box.
Amen to that. Did you hear me?
Nope.
I apologize to all the listeners. We'll have edits done now, right? I might just leave that in. So the Bible says, as a man thinketh, meaning mankind, so is he. And that's exactly what you're saying. We have these thoughts, whether we are learned behavior, whether it's self-destruction because we hate ourselves for some reason. But for you, Jacqueline, how would you recommend the listener struggling with this? Because I struggled with this badly for years, and I'm getting better. But for me, for all our listeners in over 78 countries, how would you recommend they start the process of rethinking?
So notice the messages that you give yourself. If you tell yourself you're stupid, ask yourself, is that true? If you tell yourself you're not capable, is it true? I mean, the bottom line is you have to constantly question. I mean, my work is based on a lot of questions. It's what I do as a coach. I'll ask you questions. People say they're looking for answers, and I say, let's find the good questions first. And the first number one question when you're beating yourself up, and I call it the 2x4 syndrome, when you want to take that piece of wood and slam it up the side of your head because somehow you should have known better. When you hear that voice in your head, ask yourself, who's doing the talking? Because I guarantee you that it wasn't you that put that language there. It was someone else. And I would also suggest that you ask yourself that question, is it true? Because if you have any equivocation, if you have any sense of that is not true, then change the message. I am smart. I am capable. I am lovable. I am able to do whatever it is that I want to do. There's a piece to this. You know, self-doubt is the biggest killer of all our ambitions. All the opportunities that you can have in life get squashed by self-doubt. So when you're sitting in self-doubt, ask yourself, where's my investment in staying here? What is it about being in this state that I can't move beyond? Now, here's the other thing that I noticed in my life is that I've been a big control freak all my life. But what I learned was that control is about safety. If I'm in control, if I know where everything is at, if I know what I can deal with and what I can't deal with, then my life is secure. And when you grow up in an unsafe environment like I did when I was a child, because of physical violence, because of all the emotional abuse, you distrust yourself, and you certainly distrust others. In my latest book, The Fearless Factor at Work, I talk a lot about this idea of learning how to trust yourself so that you can trust others more. And it's a two-way street. When you trust yourself, other people will come and trust you more too, because you're confident enough. It took me a long time to actually stand up and say, I'm really good at what I do, and really own that piece and not see it as a piece of arrogance, but simply because I've worked damned hard to get to where I am today. And anyone who knows me would absolutely back me up 150% on that. But that's what I'm saying is that if you're in that state of self-doubt, if you're in that questioning mind of, you know, can I really do this? Am I capable? Blah, blah, blah. Think of it this way. How do you want to change that message for yourself? And I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not, but with practice, and I'm talking about everyday practice, in the moment practice, things start to change. It's incremental.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And if you're listening, and Jacqueline, you can agree or disagree, but I know for myself, I literally would wake up and hear "you piece of crap," or, you know, I'd immediately hear these thoughts immediately, and like 40 years of that. And Rob Jackson, he was a guest on our podcast, great human, great guy, great counselor. He taught me something that I don't know if, I mean, we're just unpacking a fraction of your life here. But he told me that when you hear these voices in your head, not like audible, but you know what I mean? You hear this self-doubt, this self-sabotage, negative behavior. He said, what is it saying? Is it saying I am worthless, or is it saying you are worthless? Because to me, that was a big breakthrough moment when I understood that, because a lot of times it wasn't I'm worthless. It was you're a piece of crap. You're worthless. So that was stuff that other people put in my head, but I hung on to it. And what you said about being honest with yourself, asking the question, is it true? What a beautiful statement. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a lot of time to figure that one out, but I think that's really at core of it. And when you hear those you statements, again, to what I said earlier, whose voice is doing the talking? You know, my dad, as I said, told me I would never amount to anything. And one day I'm standing in a room full of FBI agents talking about fear. And I look up at the ceiling and I said, so what do you think now, Dad? Is it true? Not at all.
That's awesome. And now we're going to get deep into overcoming fear and teach our audience how they can push through the boundaries and break through their excuses to achieve results. I actually have a brand, growth or excuses. We can either grow or we can make excuses. Ben Franklin said that quote that's totally convicting to me. You know, he who is good at making excuses is often good at nothing else.
Right.
So that's just like, boom.
Yeah.
So before we go on into that, you just talked a little about forgiving yourself, analyzing, is this true? Is it not true? How do you build those proper relationships? So you're working on yourself, and you said usually when you believe in yourself, others will believe in you too, or trust yourself, they'll trust you too. What are your steps, like 1, 2, 3, to start our listeners building those relationships back? Like, man, I ruined a relationship with my kids and I hurt them bad. How do I go back and fix it? What's the steps to start?
Well, there's a big one right there for me. I mentioned that I walked out on my son when he was 3.5 years old, and my ex hated me. I mean, he just, and not only did I walk out on them, I was no longer in the same country, let alone the same city. So at the time, I was condemned by a lot of people. How could you walk out on your child? But at the time, I knew instinctively that if I pulled him with me wherever I was going, I was going to lead to trouble. But what happened was my ex did his best to stand between the two of us. And finally, when my son was about 12 or 13, he said to me, I can't see you anymore. Every time I see you, I come home and he just gives me hell. I just don't want to deal with it. And this is only 13 at this point. So we'd had a lot of back and forth between the age of 3.5 and 13, clearly. And it broke my heart. And I realized that I needed to give him the space because I wasn't going to drag him any further down this road. But for 5 years, I didn't talk to him. And I wanted to call and I wanted to really reach out to him. And then about 5 years later, I was in London and I decided that the hell with it. I was going to give a call. And I did. And he answered the phone. And it was like yesterday, hi, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. And that was the beginning, the opening for me. But directly after that phone call, and this is interesting, directly after that phone call, I was so high. I was so excited. I was so blown over by my emotions that I went running out of my friend's door up the road. I was going to run off some of this energy and I ran straight into a moving vehicle.
Oh,
It was definitely a wake-up call, but we had just organized to meet the next day. Now, I managed to dodge the car by turning to one side. At the time, I was doing martial arts, so my reflexes were pretty damn good. So I managed to turn my body to the side, and I took it on one side of me, but I was pretty badly bruised. Nothing broken, fortunately, but definitely bruised up one side and down the other. But I showed up for that meeting the following day because I wanted to start the healing process. Did not happen overnight. It was a years-long journey. So he's at this point about 17, 18, somewhere in there. And we agreed to keep talking. So we're having regular phone calls. He's old enough to tell his father to go take a hike, whatever. And over time, he came to visit in California. I would visit in London, blah, blah, blah. Took me several years. During that time, I tried to fix it by putting money in the way. It's like, I'm going to give you money to take care of yourself, money to go to school, money to da-da-da-da. It was a money thing. Realized that money thing was definitely not a good place to go, because what happened was he was putting that money up his nose. That definitely didn't work. So at a certain point, I had to say to him, he was about 26 at the time, I said to him, here's the deal. My heart is open, my door is open, my bank account is now closed. You better figure it out. Well, he did. He absolutely figured it out. And we continued to build our relationship. Now, he's now 46 years old, just turned 46. He's got a 5-year-old daughter. We talk every weekend. And even though there's a long distance relationship, because I'm in California, we're closer now than we've ever been. And he doesn't talk to his dad at all, because they've had a pretty poisonous relationship for a long, long time. But what I'm saying about this is that nothing happens overnight. There's no 1, 2, 3 steps on this. I have to tell you, It's about trusting your own instincts. It's about feeling that you can make a difference. It's about knowing that your mistakes are correctable. And I like to say we're all failing our way to success, because through our failures, we learn things. And the failures are what inform us of what we can do differently. So I've told you this long story about my son because you brought up children and damaging the relationship with them. I've got 4 children, 5 if you count my daughter I gave up for adoption. Every single one of them has a different mother story to tell you, and not all of them are great. So we take responsibility. That's really what it's about. I mean, I took responsibility for my son, and I said, yeah, you want to go into therapy? Drag me in with me. You want to scream and yell at me for what I didn't do? Feel free to have at it. I deserve it. I'm happy to be there for you. And that's really all you can do, especially with your kids, is try to be there for them. Because you're not always going to agree with everything that they do. You're not always going to agree with whatever it is that you did wrong and they think you did wrong. One of my other kids would have hissy fits when she was a teenager, and I would have a screaming fit with her, and she'd look at me afterwards and go, that's another 5 years of therapy you owe me. That you just have to kind of take that with a laugh and go, yeah, okay, whatever, and we've done plenty of therapy together as family.
Nice. So, yeah, I think that's a very real perspective, that when damage is done, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's just take responsibility, take that first step. No, Rome wasn't built in a day. You got to be patient. It's going to take time, and then just keep working. And you mentioned therapy multiple times, where a lot of times, because we're obviously close to the issue, a neutral third party is just a huge asset. So if someone out there listening doesn't have the funds or doesn't know a good counselor, or is like counselors are jokes, no, there really is value to them. But I will say from firsthand experience, you also have to get the right counselor, because there's people that can mess you up more than do good. So definitely do your research, your due diligence, and try to find somebody who's going to point you all to God, not take a side. Just point to God, restore all the relationships, not take sides, and pick winners and losers.
Yeah, and that's a process. I've mentioned therapy a lot because I did a lot of therapy. In the beginning, I had about 10 years of therapy. But I also saw that when we were having trouble with our kids, I would find therapy for that too, because sometimes you do need a mediator. Sometimes you just need somebody to listen to both sides of the story and then kind of mirror back to you what they're hearing. And that's when you get the value of, oh yeah, I never thought about that before. Well, and as I say to my clients, now that you can think about it that way, what do you want to do about it? Because frequently we're not even seeing what we're doing. We're not even seeing how we're thinking or how we're responding to other people. I like to say several years ago, I got to a place where there was nobody in my life that I didn't want there. And think about all the toxic people in your life. That's a big one for a lot of people. So if you think about toxic people in your life, who do you need to cease relationships with, including maybe family members? I haven't talked to my ex in 30 odd years, nor do I plan to. And when he dies, he'll be dead, and that'll be it,
Yeah, there's some relationships to restore, and there's some that you no need to.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's great. Now, yeah, and that third party, again, there was a guy we spent, like, no joke, like $6,000, and I didn't get much value from him, but I walked away with one thing. And the one thing I walked away with, like really walked away with, it wasn't unique to other people. There's always reinforcement, but I came from an Italian American home. I'm first generation American. So I grew up in a very loud society, and you said directly how you feel and you got it out and it was over with. So my normal talking, or just passionate, like I have zero animosity in me. He's like, Dave, this is how you think you sound. And he drops a tissue. And he's like, this is how you sound to people like me who didn't grow up in that environment. And he slams down a book. And that one illustration was worth the $6,000 to me. It stuck with me, and it had me think, okay, there's a huge cultural difference in communication. And I can see that now. It was that light bulb moment. Now, I'm still not perfect at it, but like you said, that counselor was great. And in that aspect, the rest, Yeah.
It's hard to put value on this. You know, I mean, someone comes to me for coaching and they say to me, well, you're very expensive. And I go, okay, so how much do you want to change? You know, I mean, I can't guarantee you at the upfront that I'm going to be able to help you deliver the goods, but I also know that my track record that I'll probably give you a few nuggets that you can take to the bank and figure something else out, you know, and that's what it comes down to.
Yep. And again, it's really, we know everything. The counselor and the coach is to draw it out of us and help us have that confidence, like you talked about, to move forward, which brings us to one more question before we get to the overcoming fear. Unpacking the baggage. That's part of every process, every aspect. Have you found a way that's helped you to unpack history, unpack the baggage, and just let it go? Because that's a huge thing. It's just to really let it go and be free. How have you found that works in your life?
I had to ask the question, is this mine or is this theirs? I think about my father, who was incredibly frustrated, disappointed, angry, self-destructive. All of his negative aspects were foisted upon me and foisted upon the rest of the family too. And so when you look at what's mine and what's yours, and I've been with my husband now for 41, going on 42 years. Never in my lifetime would I thought that I would live with somebody that long. He's been in my life longer than anyone else in except for maybe one or two people. But the point being about that is, when we would have our fights, and we had some doozies where divorce came very, very close to the edge, we really had to ask ourselves, is this mine or is this yours? And knowing how to differentiate that is what helps you to move beyond it. Because when I started recognizing that whenever anything went wrong, because I'm a damaged human being, my first response was always, it must have been something I did. And for people who are wounded, that tends to be the language that's in their head. It must have been something I did. Well, when I finally realized that, hey, I'm not responsible for all of this. What's his end of things? What is it he needs to take responsibility for? And allowing that dialogue to happen has given us a lot more room, and of course has managed to sustain the relationship this long. But I tell you, there were moments when it got this close to just going, forget it. We're not interested. But there was always that clawing back from the edge that allowed us to say, okay, let's take another look at this. And let's see, again, what am I responsible for? What are you responsible for? Because that's key to everything about change. Taking full responsibility for everything, for your thinking, for your actions, for your emotions, for everything that you are about. Take that responsibility. Because you can't blame other people. You can't put the stuff over there. And that's another big piece of this, blaming. It's easy to go into, well, it's all their fault. They're the ones who did it to me. And I, certainly for a long time, my father did it to me. But when I realized that my father did it to me because he was doing it to himself, and because it had been done to him by previous generations, there was a pattern there. And it was my job to break it. When I wrote my first book, When the Crow Sings, it's a story of 3 generations of women giving birth to children outside of marriage, set in Scotland. And I told the story of my grandmother, my mother, and myself, because all these generations had children outside of marriage, which in those days, was illegitimacy. It's not such a big deal anymore because it doesn't mean anything at this stage of our evolution. But back then, there was a stigma attached to that. So I told the story of these 3 generations of women and all of the stuff that goes along with that, but realizing somebody has to break the chains. And I broke mine by giving my child up for adoption and not going through trying to make it work. She did much better because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for being so transparent with us. We really appreciate that. Being married in today's society for 41 years is an accomplishment in itself. And to have already been divorced, statistically, you can see the numbers. Every time you get divorced or have a relationship, even a dating relationship that breaks, your chance of divorce statistically go up. But you said clawing back by taking responsibility and by being, not blaming, but being responsible for your own actions, saying, well, what am I responsible for here? That kept you in the marriage instead of quitting. And that's the right thing to do. What was the thought that was going through your mind to say it's worth fighting for, keep fighting for, let's keep going? So for those listeners out there struggling in their marriages right now, in their relationships, how can they learn to hold on?
Well, first of all, I can go find somebody else, but they're going to come with their baggage too. So I've got to sort out their baggage, which, is a job in itself. And also, will that person be conscious enough to know that their baggage is theirs, and not want to project it onto others? Because that's another reason why relationships struggle, because there's too much projection onto the other person. So I think what really allowed us to know that this was worth hanging on to is, we had children together, and we also had a similar value system, things that were important to us. Because a lot of the time in relationships, whether it's at home or at work, it's because your values aren't aligned. So the things that you consider to be important are not important to the other person. So analyze your values. Take a good look at them. Are we, in sync? I mean, once you get over the in love period, this is really all about, a relationship. It's a collaboration, if you like. That's what we're in. Because a marriage is not just about, love and marriage and the carriage and all that good stuff that goes along with it. It is simply a matter of two people who have made a relationship, what's the word I'm looking for? They made a deal that this is important to both of them, and they're going to make it work. And that's really what it came down to. It was important enough to both of us to say, it'll work. I mean, I sent him away 2 years ago for 2 months, and I said, don't come back till you get your head straight. And 2 months later, he came back and he had his head straight because he realized where he was getting in his own way.
That's awesome. And you lead us into our next topic perfectly. They take studies of people and say, what are your biggest fears? They got public speaking, death, and commitment, right? Those are the top three. So talk to us now about overcoming fear. You have your new book, The Fearless Factor, but talk to us about overcoming fear. We all have different fears. Some are rational, some are irrational, some are based on history, and then we think the future is going to continue, which it doesn't have to. So talk to us about fear and overcoming fear.
So my simple philosophy on being fearless is this: not the absence of fear. It's the courage to take the next step. Now, taking the next step is for many people where they get stuck. It's like, I don't know what the next step looks like. I don't know if I take that step, if it's going to be okay. Am I going to be safe? I don't know if I take that next step, if things are going to work out the way that I would like them to work out. There's a big piece in there. So I like to say also that being fearless, or fear is imagination based. Think about it. Fear is an emotion. What drives our emotions? Our thinking. So when you think about fear being imagination based, you're making up stories that address your anxiety, your uncertainties, your worry, your fears about the future. Now, here's the thing about the fears about the future. When we project into the future based on our experience of the past and forget that in this moment we have an option to make a different decision, make a different choice, to actually be in the moment, then your future can be as good as you want it to be, because it's about positive thinking. There's another big piece of this. If you're constantly feeding yourself negativity, how do you want to create a future that actually looks like it's worth living, as opposed to a future of same old, and therefore I'm still living in the past? So how do you move out of that past? And like I said earlier, for me, the past is a story. That's what happened. Now, I like to say the past, we talk about what I talked about 5 minutes ago. I couldn't tell you. I would have to have a replay in order to figure that out. And what's going to happen in five minutes from now? No idea. So this is our only reality. This here is our present. Now think about the word present. It's the gift. It's the gift you give yourself when you realize that from this moment, I can go in a different direction, should I choose. So being fearless, again, taking that next step, having the courage to take that next step becomes the real key to overcoming your fears.
That is inspiring and it's exciting. And if people are listening and you don't fully get it, there's different levels of understanding. If it's starting to make sense, keep replaying that until it clicks. Because when you have that aha moment, you're going to be filled with power. And you remind me of the verse too, talking about the thinking. The Bible says, commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thought shall be established. So if you're listening to this, you're like, I don't get it. Well, don't get it. Just start doing the right things. Like Jacqueline saying, just do the right things and your thoughts are going to start changing. Quickly, we talked about thinking and changing your thinking, but what kind of some easy win steps can our listeners take to live more fearlessly?
So reward yourself at the end of the day. If you found yourself getting embroiled in old habits, there you go again. You know that phrase. Oh, there you go again. Okay, so there you go again, but you actually hesitated a moment and said, no, wait a minute, I want to do that differently. Then at the end of the day, make a note of it. One of the things that I do and have done for years and highly recommend is keep a gratitude journal. And it's not just gratitude for other people and whatever they're doing. It's about gratitude for your own actions, gratitude for who you are. Being grateful that you have the opportunity, you have a wonderful mind to use it. It's like you have the ability to make those changes. So I would start with gratitude, number one, and there's a reward for you, because at the end of the year, after you've kept a gratitude journal every day, 3 things, that's all you need to do. You look back on that and all you can remember is the good times in your life, not bad times. Because I got loads of journals with all the bad times in there and all the stuff I had to process and blah, 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 blah. And that can be very valuable too. But ultimately, you want to focus on the positive stuff. So again, giving yourself a reward when you notice that you stopped yourself, when you notice that you had a different interaction with someone that had caused you problems before. If you notice, for instance, you hate confrontations, because confrontations basically points out that you're a loser, that you're no good, you're this, that, and the next thing. Remember that you're putting that thinking into the mind of someone else. Another side of that, of course, is worrying about what other people will say. Well, I like to say what other people are thinking is none of your business. It's enough that you can manage your own head without trying to manage someone else's head. So, again, catch yourself in the moment. See what you see. Take responsibility for wanting to change that up. And when you fall down, when you fail at catching yourself, because sometimes we're in it before we even know we're in it, know that next time you'll try a little bit harder to make a difference.
Amen to that. Now, I want to back up. Maybe I should ask this question, 20 minutes ago. A lot of people don't even realize they live in fear every day. Define fear and explain kind of what that looks like, because it's not watching a scary movie and being terrified, or it's not, thinking someone's chasing you and the adrenaline's pumping. There's different types of fear, and a lot of people are just controlled and held captive by fear. So how would Jacqueline define what fear is, and give us some examples of what people can look for in their life, common types of fear that you see in your practice every day?
So the primary one is confidence. If you're not feeling confident about undertaking certain things, if you're not feeling confident about opening up your mouth and speaking in a meeting, if you're not confident about asking your boss or asking a question when you've got questions and you're not really living into that place, these are very clear indications that you're afraid. Because here's the bottom line on fear, Dave. The fear of I'm not good enough And even although I've had clients who have self-sabotaged, who have created all kinds of issues for themselves with their confidence and competence issues. And I'll say to them, do you feel like you're not good enough? And then the answer comes back, well, of course I'm good enough. All right. So why is your behavior pointing out that you really don't feel like you're good enough, that you feel like you're kind of a waste of time, if you like, because that's a part of our thinking as well. So when we're looking at fear, when I ask people, what's your biggest fear? 9 times out of 10, it's fear of failure. So if we stop ourselves from wanting to fail, you're not taking enough risks in life. So again, if you're not taking risks in life, where's your fear factor here? If I really step out here and make a statement, how are people going to respond? It took me years to be able to have the confidence to say, this is what I believe. And I don't really care if you believe it or not. It doesn't really matter. It's what I believe. So that's a confidence piece right there. Taking on a job that you maybe think you could do, but you're not 100% sure. Rather than wait for the opportunity to come up where you feel like you're totally comfortable, take the edge. Push yourself a little bit further. Because again, if you're not taking the edge, if you're looking at wanting to maintain status quo and stay in your comfort zone, which is really your discomfort zone, there's your fear in operation right there.
All right, let's throw some stones, big ones. You're going to help us help our listeners get off the fence. So there's people out there right now that, the Bible talks about a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, right? And, anybody who knows, even if you don't read your Bible, it's, if you don't have a position, like you said, know what you believe in, why, and rest assuredly in it. You're just like a boat tossed with the waves, right? So there's people on the fence right now. In their heads, they know that they have value. They know that they have talent, and they believe it. They really know it. But then in their hearts, they hear those voices, I'm worthless, I'm no good. So they may literally think, I'm the most dynamic, blank, blank, blank widget maker in the world. But then inside, they're like, man, if I started my own widget making company, I could fail. How do you knock those people on the fence to the good side?
So here's the thing. None of us build anything significant overnight. It's an incremental thing. It's an inching forward. It's like when people say, how do I get more confident? And I go, well, you start behaving differently, you start thinking differently. And one day you realize that you're not doing the old shit anymore. You're actually, showing up and being your full self with regards to what's going on. So, the piece for me is, as you say, getting off the fence, take that next step. It doesn't have to be a huge staircase. It just needs to be one step. Do something different that you wouldn't have done yesterday, that you're willing to do something today. Eleanor Roosevelt has said at a certain point, do something every day that scares you, and of course her husband at the time Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And of course he was in the Second World War at that point in time. So there was a lot of reasons to think that way. But the point being is, it's simple. It's not complicated. We like to complicate things. We like to find all the excuses in the world. We like to put all kinds of reasons why we can't. Well, just for once, try I can. And make it small enough that if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. But small enough that if you do something and it changes, you can build on it.
I think that's great advice. So if I'm hearing you, you're kind of saying what our slogan is. Don't just listen to this great information that Jacqueline's bringing us, but do it. Repeat it every day. Stay consistent so you can have a great life. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely. I mean, if somebody had told me, 15, 20 years ago that I'd be sitting here having this conversation with as much conviction as I have at this moment, I would have gone, yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe not.
That is awesome. Thank you for being here today. Now, we've gone through the past and we're going to get into where you are today and where you're going. Is there anything else in the past that we missed that you want to speak of, that you feel like, I need to share this, I think it'll bring the audience value, or we hit all the high points?
I think you've hit all the high points at this stage. I have lots and lots of stories, but yeah, we've covered a lot of them.
Okay, then where is Jacqueline today, and where are you going so we can help you get there?
Well, thank you. So Jacqueline today has built her organization that I call the Fearless Factor at Work, or the Fearless Factor. And what I'm doing is I'm working with women specifically who are accomplished to a great degree, but who are ready to take that next step, who are ready to, perhaps move away from the limitations of whatever it is that they've been involved with. And I created something called the Fearless Change Program, because one of the things that I truly believe, I spent years figuring out all my stuff, but I want to help people do it in the fastest time possible. So I've got a 6-week program that I just put together last year, and it's done with coaching, both individually and with groups, as well as some online content that is really designed to get you thinking, to be reflective, to truly help you open up your mind to new things. And my goal over the next few years is I want to build this thing out so that I can help as many people as possible, either through online courses or through the individual attention that I give people. So the Fearless Factor at Work is really, like I say every year, I'm just getting started, because I really do feel that my job here is to be of service to as many people as possible in whatever way I can, and help people understand that they have the power. They can move beyond whatever insecurities, whatever uncertainties, whatever fears are running their lives right now. You have the power to be able to move beyond that, and it doesn't have to take forever to do that either. There are ways and means to be able to accelerate that process. So I'm doing that through my books, I'm doing it through my online programming, I'm doing it through my coaching practice. And over the next 10 years, I would like to really build this out so that other coaches can use this system. Other coaches and other people who could find this helpful would use this system and be able to help the networks and the communities that they serve over the years. And maybe in 10 years from now, I might even think about some kind of retirement, because I'll be almost 80. So what the hell? Maybe it's time to lay it down.
Oh man, you look so young. If you guys are listening or watching, you're going to be 80 in 10 years. Seriously?
Yes.
You look like you're in your 50s. Dang, good genetics. All right. Well, for our listeners who want to get a hold of you and they're like, I want to talk to Jacqueline, how, why, where, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So first of all, go visit my website, The Fearless Factor at Work. And on that site, I want you to go download a PDF that's called Give Fear the Finger. And it's an exercise that's designed to help you understand, what are the fears that are holding you back, and help you to realize which one of them are real and which ones are not, and then taking some action steps to get beyond it. So that's first and foremost. Go get that PDF, download it, and do the exercise. It's called Fear is a 4-letter word. So there we go. Secondly, you can contact me through my website. My email address is jacqueline@thefearlessfactoratwork.com, and I'm happy for you to reach out by email too if I can be of help to you. But there's a lot of resources on the website that you can definitely take advantage of if you're really committed to doing the work to help you understand more about who you are and how you're showing up in the world.
Awesome. And we're going to put all these links in the show notes, so you can check out the show notes, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Just go ahead and just click those show notes. You can get a hyperlink right there. And then also, if you need anything, you can reach out to Jacqueline, like she said, right directly through her website. Now, if you're listening, stick around. There's going to be a special offer at the end that we have for you. So you'll have that to enjoy. And Jacqueline, this has been a great time together. Is there anything else that we missed or that you want to share? I know you're a busy woman and I want to respect your time, but is there anything else that you want to cover before we close for the day?
I would just say to people listening to this, do not from where you want to go. Let your imagination go in a positive direction. Let your imagination run. Allow yourself to believe that you can create the life that you want to create.
Amen. And on those words, Jacqueline, it's been a true pleasure. You are a remarkable woman. I am thankful you were on the show. So thank you for being here today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Thank
you,
okay.
Dave.
Okay. It says on my side, the internet connection is unstable. And of course, it's right at the end of the podcast. All right. So to our listeners, we love you. Hang out one more minute for this special offer. And Jacqueline, thank you so much for being here. And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. All right, fake, you're not going to see this part, but Jacqueline, is there anything else you want to cover that we missed or have a parting thought for our audience?
So my thing is to take the next step, no matter what is going on for you. Trust that you can take that next step. Trust that you can achieve the things that you want to achieve. Believe in yourself. Believe that no matter how hard it feels, and no matter how hard things might feel like they're getting, keep that belief in yourself. Keep that belief in everything that you are putting out there and your future vision of who you want to be and how you want to be living your life. And one of the big secrets that I like to think about is, who do you want to be in 3 years? Not what do you want to do, but who do you want to be in 3 years? And if you think about even just a year from now, who do you want to be in a year from now? Think about what that person looks like. What is she or he doing? What is she saying? And give yourself the opportunity to experience that.
Awesome. That is great advice. Thank you for being here today, Jacqueline. Ladies and gentlemen, stay around for a special offer for our remarkable community, and we will see you, Jacqueline, soon. I can't wait to continue the conversation and the friendship. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much, David. It's been a pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you've just heard Jacqueline share with us incredible insights on overcoming fear. We've talked about all sorts of great things about pushing through to get past over our excuses and achieve results, and just all sorts of things that are practical, forgiving yourself, taking responsibility. But on top of all that great information, Jacqueline has a special offer for you. So Jacqueline, at this time, will you share with our audience the privilege you're going to give them?
So here's my special gift to your audience. If they go to my website, thefearlessfactoratwork.com, and go under the navigation of courses, and when you open that up, you'll see all kinds of courses that I have for your learning and clearly for sale. But here's my gift to you. Go to the one that says Transitioning Your Career for Success. That's the title of the course, Transitioning Your Career for Success. And when you put that into the cart, you're going to put a coupon code with that, which will be JW21. And when you put the coupon code in there, it won't cost you a dime. And you go through the process of downloading this. This is my gift to you. It's free. It's normally $49, but for you, it's free. Put in the coupon code JW21 and you can download it, and it will give you all kinds of great insights and opportunities to reflect on how you can not only transition your career, but transition your life too.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And to our friends all over the world, we thank you for being here. We love you. Listen to this episode, do it, repeat it for life, share it with your friends and family, those you love, and let's all grow together. I'm David Pasquale with the Remarkable People Podcast. If I can help you, please let me know. Jacqueline is there to help you if you need anything. And with that, we'll see you next week. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat for life.